Oh, I realized I hadn't put on the recording, so we've got the question and Q&As here for you to listen, and decide to put in your presentation next time. So I just started it. All my
Okay.
trademark stuff's not there, and the stuff you talked about Backer Kit isn't. So we'll deal with that separately. You'll remember it, but I wanted
Okay.
to make it accessible to these folks. Keep going.
Okay. Anyway, so um, the shipping can literally kill you if you don't do it right. And one of the things I was toying with is, and I mentioned about using distributors overseas, and I just tell people in the Kickstarter, I am not shipping this outside of, say, North America. Just not happening. Okay. But if you want to get the game or the book or whatever it is, I have distributors or book dealers or game dealers overseas, and I will send you the information on how to order it once they have it. Okay, which that makes them happy. They get more customers, and that way you don't have to sit here and try and box up individual games or books that cost, in some cases, more than the game or the book to ship to Taiwan or Japan or Australia. Because it's just gotten to be ridiculous on the shipping fees.
But at least for those North American ones, it sounds like you're getting you're having them produced and you're actually shipping them out yourself through UPS or wherever else.
Yes, I found out that that is much cheaper than using some of the different companies that have set themselves up to be fulfillment companies for Kickstarter. I had a bad experience with one, but it was related to the COVID lockdown. And once that happened, once they had to shut down, they literally were almost out of business. And so all of a sudden, I had sold the Kickstarter on the idea that we had a fulfillment company. We'll send them names and addresses. They'll charge us a fee and the cost of, and they stopped because of COVID and the huge jump in prices and costs for shipping. They just stopped, even though we had promised it in the Kickstarter. It was no longer available. So it was really a terrible mess. So I like Backer Kit, even if I'm only shipping United States, simply because having them collect it, they do the follow up, they can let you know what they need specifically in order to fulfill things. But I do the fulfillment. Okay, I make sure, because then I have a better way to track it, and I use something called stamps.com. But there are other companies as well. What they do is they actually give you a discount. If you walk a package into the post office, that is not the cheapest way. You can use stamps.com, type in the label, print the label, slap it on the box, and take 20 boxes into the post office, and it's a discount on the postage to do that. And UPS is the same way.
Same way we used to get postage meters. It's just an electronic tool.
Okay.
Now,
That's right.
the other thing I want to point out to you, just so you know, there are other resources. There are other people here at this event that can give you feedback on how fulfillment works and alternatives. And one I would recommend to talk to, if you can, is Jim Dietz of the Dietz Foundation. He was a professional publisher and now is retired and takes projects with his not-for-profit company and finds games he likes and helps fulfill them. He just did Littoral Commander for, say, Sebastian Bay, a former Marine officer and wargamer in DC. That's a contractor. That's what he does full time for his career. And that's the new game that they've got here. And they were packaging up stuff, the components from their fulfillment company in his basement, because that's the way he does it. And they're small print runs. So another consideration here is, how big is your print run going to be? How are you going to fund it? You know, is the Kickstarter to do edition 2 or edition 1? You know, Kickstarter isn't the only game in town, but Kickstarter gives you a lot of visibility. It can also be a real and different kind of risk. And everything is layers of effort, because most of you are going to be a one-person shop right now.
Right, and that was what I was curious about and wasn't really sure about. So, like, you know, is it really like 500 copies being shipped to someone and then like a label maker in their basement doing all that and sending it out? It sounds like in some cases the answer is yes, unless you're using a fulfillment company.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you don't have a fulfillment company or you don't have a distributor that's managing that,
Yeah.
Now there are different models. Like come on, Dana, help my memory. What was the one company, Victory Point Games, that had one of these high-end laser printers?
Yes.
And they were printing on demand
Yes.
on the East Coast, and they found it became uneconomic, and then they tried moving to the West Coast because they could get better equipment, cheaper warehousing. But eventually they went out of the print for demand business because the small lots were too much. I mean, they were putting out high quality product, high resolution laser cut paper counters, extra thick, Ziploc bags or boxes. They were really nice products, and they were very competitively priced when they were doing it. And then they just found that they couldn't be a competitive price anymore.
Right.
And we've seen things like GMT prices pretty much go through the roof. The thing is, you wind up doing a Kickstarter or a P500 for a company like that, and the shipping takes up the difference between what you would pay in a store versus getting it from them, but you get it a little earlier.
Right.
So they're still doing the fulfillment and all those pieces, but you can get it earlier as the bonus. You're not getting it cheaper. You're not getting any specials. It's not like a Kickstarter in that way.
There's a company called Blue Panther. Blue Panther does print on demand and also very short runs, but they're not cheap. Okay, so if you think you're going to do like a couple of 100 games, that might be a better way than trying to publish 1,000 games. Okay, and hope you sell them.
Isn't there another one out of Tennessee? They've got sort of a hexagon logo. They show up at the HMGS conventions talking about printing your game.
Right. Yep.
And your situation, you were doing a card game. So who did you have produce the cards for you? Didn't you say you had sent that to a print shop in China?
No. Oh, the one. Yeah, the one that I did, the World War I card game. There was a company in the United States, and keep in mind this is pre-COVID, that did the cards and were just a little bit more expensive than doing it in China. And so it was like, well, why go to China? That way I'll make sure I get it. And I did. I got it. But what's the most expensive thing now that's just crazy are boxes. There are not that many box manufacturers. And one of the things to seriously think about, they used to call them Ziploc games. I don't know if you have used the term still. Okay.
Some of us have them, yeah.
Yeah, so I am actually seriously thinking of doing some games as Ziploc games, simply because it'll be more affordable, much cheaper to ship, and people, if they want to, they can get a box and at a store and put it in. It won't be fancy, it won't have a 4-color cover, but you're paying a lot of money now currently.
The other thing is, if you're doing card games, depending on volume, I know of 3 other suppliers. There's the Guild of Blades people in Michigan that are basically a game shop that's got their own print shop, and they do custom prints. There's also Card Monday if you want really high quality cards. Those are the guys that do the Magic cards over, I think it's in Belgium. Okay, and although it sounds weird that people don't know this, the U.S. Playing Card Company will build you custom decks.
Yes,
but how far they'll go with the artwork, I'm unclear.
Again, it depends on how many copies. I had a game where I only needed a couple of 100 copies of the game, period. I was never going to publish 1,000 copies. So when you have something like that, I went with Blue Panther. But there are other things, as Merle says, other companies that you can use to do that. So you don't have to, at least in games, publish 1,000 of everything. But for a book, a hardcover book, for example, the cost savings to do 1,000 books. I mean, if you say, well, I only need 250, well, you'll probably pay as much for 250 books as for 1,000, just because the cost of running the presses is so great, and the bindery, that you might as well just do 1,000.
So if it's not too personal question, Dana, how many copies of the Great War did you have made?
We had a hard 1,000, and what that means is you get more than 1,000. In other words, the printer usually says a plus or minus 10%, which means that when they run all the components, you might only get 900. You only pay for that, but when they run it, they may only be 900 copies that are usable. And I not only wanted 1,000 hard versions, but anything extra would be used for like spare parts, which people want. Either they want extra sets of the deck or having an extra copy of a box, because boxes get damaged, from whatever reason, and people will actually pay for those. So when I say a hard 1,000, you're saying it must be at least 1,000 copies.
And I think that's great that you planned ahead that way, because a lot of people would not.
Yeah, I mean, we had to think about spare parts. I mean, it's not that you have to order huge amounts extra, but we burned through 1,100 copies of the game, and the dice, and the card decks, and so forth.
So do you have any other questions? This is personal consulting. It's one person left in the audience. You're the last one standing, because he's staff.
Oh. I just came in to say hi to Dana.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, Dana. I have a board game, and that's
Okay.
what I'm looking at. And so I'm totally new to this. I came to this gaming convention to totally learn the process. So what I'm trying to do is balance.
So you know about Panda, and you know about Game Crafter?
I have heard of Panda. I have not heard of
We'll
Game
talk
Crafter.
about that
These things are what I'm taking notes on and writing down.
What type of game do you have?
It is a board game. It is a family game. It's ages for 5 and up.
Okay.
It's 2 to infinite number of players.
Okay.
Um,
So your vision is the pieces will be paper, cardboard, wood, plastic,
at this point, I have a prototype,
right?
and the game pieces are colored glass.
Okay. So
There are cards that say move forward 3 spaces, lose a turn.
Right.
This is a really family-friendly board game. It is not a role-playing game.
Okay.
It's not complex.
Sure.
Where are you located? Here in Columbus?
Orlando, Florida.
Orlando, Florida. Okay. So let's back up a couple steps. There are more things that you could choose to learn about that would be valuable.
Okay.
There are a number of companies that show up at other conventions than this one, because this one's been bigger in the past and had different audience,
Right.
that are companies you should look at.
Mhm.
If you go to Gen Con, even if and that's in Indianapolis in about a month or so,
Beginning
Okay.
of August.
you want to go to look at Game Crafters, and they run events called Proto Spiels at various places around the country, where you pay to go to the convention and everybody will come and play test your game, and they give away free components for people to use to develop their game as part of the thing and the fee. The big one's in Madison, and they have some seminars about the math of games and things like that. So like if you're trying to balance stuff, how to do that. They have lots and lots of components, but they're the high price leader. Okay. They have special boxes. They'll make your game for you. I know a couple people that have published through that.
Okay.
Okay. But they're a Midwest American company, and they're fairly high priced, but you get a quality product. Then there's some Chinese companies, and Panda is one of them, and you can look them up online, and they have videos that talk about their whole process, and they show up at Gen Con.
Mhm.
There's at least 3 or 4 companies of that ilk that show up in that dealer hall every year.
But is that more of me going and I'm leasing them my game?
No,
Or is
that's
that they're a manufacturer?
no. They are going to manufacture your game and may do everything up to and including the packaging, and may do the shipping. Game Crafter, for example, has a website where people can sell their game and get the proceeds, but they do it through the store for Game Crafter. So Game Crafter would tell you, here's all your tax receipts, because they've sold it for you electronically, and they've collected those, at least in the US for the most part.
Right.
And then you're still going to have to deal with taxes, because as far as I know, they don't do the taxes and the paperwork and the corporation stuff.
Right.
And if you're going to sell a game as a business rather than as a single person, because you can be a sole proprietor,
Mhm.
okay, you have to have an EIN and go through the IRS stuff and the incorporation stuff. So that's a challenge too. But the
Something-
universe is pretty big. The other thing you need to understand is probably you're going to want to test the waters with a fairly small run initially. Okay. The key is be sure you keep your rights. Did I mention be sure you keep your rights? Okay. Otherwise, you would be considering doing something like going to a company like Hasbro, which generally doesn't take unsolicited stuff,
Right.
and say, will you publish my game? And they'll say, sure, we'll buy it for $100,000 and that's all you're ever going to get.
Right.
Okay.
That's something else. Like here in Central Ohio, we have a COGD, Central Ohio Gamers, Game Design Group.
Mhm.
And they need.
And there are a number of Facebook groups
Right.
from here to England, of which I'm in a lot of them because I track that stuff. And I advertise to them because we have the professional wargaming conventions like Connections.
So probably Orlando is a large enough metropolitan area. You might have a game designer group right there in town.
Probably
right?
so. In fact, you need to look at one other thing, but I'm going to caution you. You need to look at an organization called Serious Play. And Dana knows about Serious Play. Serious Play is mostly, I think, educators and mostly computer-friendly kind of folks that talk about how to use play in education and other things. But you will find that it has a marked tilt. I'm trying to think how to explain it. Serious Play seems to me like it's a bunch of people who are providing a service and trying to make money and overblow some of the parts of the hobby because they sell you a membership and you can do online and get video access to a whole bunch of stuff that's promotional and sales stuff that sounds like they're selling cars. Okay. Some stuff's free and some stuff's costs money. And going to the conferences, I've heard mixed reports about, depending on what you're interested in. So recognize it's not going to be the core of your market. That doesn't mean there aren't people with skills that you want. In my experience, and I've been around gaming since the 70s, and I've been heavily involved with game design and game designers and game design conventions because I do the military and real world gaming stuff for like 15 years. You'll find that you can go to an entirely different kind of convention. Like you go to a Euro game convention where they're playing Catan and all that kind of stuff. And there are mechanics you're going to see that you may find useful for your game for this design or the next design. There may be somebody that knows about a packager, a distributor, or whatever that does something special that you want. Say you want custom parts, or that is a regional one, and we'll talk to people who are small scale, like indie press kind of stuff. Okay. There's some people that choose to buy a table here at Origins and sell the games that they had a distributor build, and the only place you can get it is by them showing up at a convention. Okay. And that's their starting model until they build their confidence.
Right.
So, realize that every one of these things is a niche. It's like there's a whole series of people who are doing game design in colleges, most of which are game design for computer games, but some are for role-playing games. And a lot of them, they're not in the league of the people we're dealing with in DC that are DOD and Beltway bandits on when it comes to simulation. Because, you also, there are simulators, there are gamers, and there are a spectrum in between. All right. And you're allowed to be both. You just have to know what your niche is.
Right.
And finding the group that matches your niche is where you're going to get the most value. But talking to the other niches, especially if you're learning, has another and special value. Because as you build your skill set and move from novice to amateur to journeyman to master, okay, that's a big difference. It should take you, and we've learned this in almost every profession, at least 3,000 hours of focused effort to become an effective person as a journeyman level. I hate to use the gender term, but I don't have a better one, okay? But to be a journeyman takes 3,000 hours of focus. And if you look at the serious play people, some of their founders, including a Berkeley professor that I've heard speak, was all about 3,000 hours makes you an expert. And they were trying to build that. Her outfit is called Games for Change. Okay. And they would do something like, how do I distribute water in an African village? And they get all these people with the wisdom of masses, supposedly, not always wisdom, but they would try to figure out different ways to distribute water and make a system that's cheap, bamboo, PVC, whatever, how I get water to everybody in the village. And that's a project kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And they were doing it online, and it really worked well. It's like SETI, some things that really worked well for. So recognize there are all those different communities, and everyone has different stuff. It's like there's a Cincinnati game meetup group down here that meets, and they were having a special forum at Origins. There are Origins Facebook pages and groups that you can join. Gamma has some professional groups that you can get into as well. That you'll hear from professionals in the field. But remember, Gamma's manufacturers, like Blue Panther kind of people. They're the manufacturers, and some are distributors, and they're few retailers. They're not game designers as a whole. They're not retailers in the sense that the people on the floor are. Okay. Well, that's not exactly true. There's a lot of people on the floor that are Gamma people, but that's a whole nother bailiwick. But there are a lot of things going on, and there are game conventions of other kinds that are frequently done and that I know of in Florida, like the Historical Miniatures Gaming Society people are doing a lot of miniatures games down in Orlando. They've got a big convention called Huracan. Okay. So if you put in and look for game conventions, and now you signed up for Origins and tabletop events, right? So look under Florida, Alabama, because Mobile you probably can reach, Georgia, and see where there are conventions. Read the convention profile, read what they say they're about, and go for a day. See if there's somebody worth meeting. Go through the dealer hall, look for people that are doing games like yours, games focused the same age groups.
Right.
For kids games, Looney Labs. The people's name is Looney. They make the card game Flux. Crystal Palace.
Apparently my game, I've heard a couple of people say my game sounds a little bit like Flux.
Mm-hmm. Flux is a great game. They've reskinned it 15 times. Yeah. You got Flux Star Trek, Flux Zombies. I mean, it's a cute game. It's a gateway drug. If you want somebody to learn to be a gamer, here's a deck of Flux. And they're all card games.
Yeah. Mine's not a card game. Mine is
well, yeah, and that's okay.
But yeah.
But that doesn't mean you can't learn something there.
Oh yes.
You got any other thoughts on places she could go, Dana? Because it is supposed to be your presentation.
Yes. It's been hijacked by you, Merle.
Well, we did tag team the last time we did this.
Yes, that's true. And
you liked it, so it's like.
So I have to say that I don't know. I want to be careful here because Merle and I could go on for the next 2 hours with more anecdotes and more thoughts but at some point you got to just start, some point you just got to go out there and start making connections, which will lead to more connections and so forth. And then finally you have to decide when you're going to pull the trigger. I mean, you could spend the next 5 years doing research and still not have everything because the marketplace changes, production changes. You should do whatever you feel you need to do to get your game out there, whether you want a prototype for Protospiel, which would be a great idea. Merle, that's genius. Just sending her to Protospiel where she'll meet like-minded creative people that are trying to get their games out there, get them in front of people and get feedback. That would be wonderful. But I don't know where you are in terms of what you want to do with your game or how you want to get it produced. Are you looking to do it yourself? Are you looking to sell it to a big company? Do you just want to have it because you'd like to have something creative that you can show family and friends. I mean, those are decisions for you, but we could go on, like I said, forever. But I'm just concerned that we're at some point we're going to be well over, the glass is going to be flowing out all over the place, and it's just going to be hard to take control of the situation and figure out what you want to, what the next step should be.
If you look up the word proto-spiel, and spiel is basically spelled the German way because that's what they're trying to imitate, S-P-I-E-L, proto-spiel, okay? It talks about what is a proto-spiel on tabletop events, and it lists the ones they've been doing. They started up in Minneapolis, in Madison, I think it was, because Game Crafters Factory and their staff are up there, okay? And they travel out to the cons. You can meet them at Gen Con for sure. Okay. I think they may even get as far south as NashCon in Nashville. But basically, there's 50 to 200 people at a protospiel. It's a mix of 60% game designers and 40% playtesters most of the time. This is their description. Ages 12 to 70. And that's pretty accurate. It tends to be more male because gaming is more male that is organized. Okay. And a bunch of them are old timers. Don't know where that comes from. Kinds of games will be strategic games, card games, board games, all kinds of stuff. And the game crafter people bring all their little tokens and toys and give away dozens because it's like it costs you $200 to go or something, and they give you supplies. And normally they have stuff on the math of your game. If you want your card game to be balanced, here's how to do the statistics in the math and all that kind of stuff if you're into that.
I'm sorry. I had no idea why someone's calling me.
I like that tone.
Yeah,
It's annoying, so
gets your attention.
it gets your attention. So I apologize. So, all right, so I will look at the protospiel. I guess what I'm trying to determine for me, what is the best, do this, then this is the next. Like right now I'm looking at like manufacturers to produce the pieces. Do I need to have that set up? Obviously I've learned before the Kickstarter.
Okay, wait a minute. Let's back up.
Okay.
This would be my recommendation. It's an opinion, but it's a trained opinion.
Okay.
What you want is a prototype
I have a prototype
that has all of the approach that you're outlining.
Mm-hmm.
My recommendation, I think it's Dana's recommendation, know what your game mechanics are ahead of time. Okay. Don't be trying to add rules and finish it out. Play testing is one thing, redesign is another. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm to me, I feel like I'm at the redesign part. There's things I'd like to correct before going.
The second step is to figure out how you want your game to look and feel. So it's figuring out what kind of components you want versus the components you can live with. Because it's probably pretty easy to print cardboard tokens, but if you want Monopoly little figures that are made out of pewter, that's a different cost and look and feel. And it has to do with what your vision of your game is. And, I think you pretty much decided just from listening to you that it's not vanity press, which means it's got to be economically, something you figure you can sell when you figure out the price of all the pieces. Okay. But the look and feel is important. And whether you buy artwork or you have a friend that's going to do artwork for hire or whatever, you've got to have an idea of that.
Right.
That stuff you pretty much should have nailed down before you kickstart. He had an artist. Right, Dana? You had an artist. You knew who your provider was likely to be, which was Blue Panther for actual production. Okay, having that is important before you leap into the Kickstarter, or you're going to get the rude surprise.
Right.
Like Dana got a surprise he doesn't talk about, which was the shipping stuff. He talked around it. You've talked more about it before, and how much shipping changed, and how your price point for the game, if you hadn't sold so many copies, would have been a problem. See, he nods, but he's not going to admit to that again, I guess. Okay.
It's not perfect. Yes.
Okay.
No, I understand that. Yeah. Okay.
So hopefully that helps you.
Yes, that does help me. It does. That's why I came to the convention, trying to get this, because I got it. I've beta tested it. I've gotten positive reviews. Now I need to find the correct steps without stumbling and making mistakes.
Let me double check.
Yeah.
I forget how far Jim went into this when we had him at the convention. Because Jim Dietz of the Dietz Foundation, I told you he was a professional publisher. He sold his company and basically retired, and now he does it as a non-for-profit for things he thinks are important. Jim is a great guy to talk to. He's down in the dealer hall. Okay, Jim Dietz, Dietz. But I believe he's got a video about what you should think of, what he looks for when somebody brings him game design, and that will help you a lot. So I'm pretty sure, I'm trying to remember which of our cons we did that for. If it was Connections Online, yes, it was. So look, there's a website called Armchair Dragoons, like the old cavalry units, Dragoons. Armchair Dragoons has a thing that says conventions at their top menu line. And the conventions they have include something called Connections Online. Okay? And there's 3 years of Connections Online videos. And one of them is Jim Dietz talking about what he looks for when somebody brings a design to him. And Connections Online might help you, but it's a little bit more the military professional kind of thing. So there's some that are good for you.
Well,
and
the
some
truth is the board is versatile enough that with the alteration of a couple of game pieces and the way it's designed, for a few extra bucks, you can buy a different overlay.
A different skin.
A different skin. Thank you. And different cards, and it could become a war game.
Sure. I mean,
So
your mechanic is the driver.
Yeah.
There's lots of people that reskin and have themes. You can do a Game of Thrones version of this. You could do
Which this game is excellent for.
Okay. So the
other thing before he takes you off the primrose path, there's an ironclad rule. You've got to build in a fudge factor on the finances, because something will always come up and bite you.
Oh yeah.
It can be the shipping. It could be a production thing. It could be an artist getting sick. But you'll always have something that comes in and nips you.
Okay. Is there anything that we've left out, Dana, that you wanted to talk about?
Only about 3 or 4 days worth of information.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I'll give me your email. I'll email you back and forth. We'll set up a video conference. We'll talk about it.
Yeah. And if you need it.
I forget that. Yes.
No, I honestly, I think that I tried to do a talk within an hour that would be an overview, and there were a lot of things that just weren't obviously that you couldn't go into depth. Merle has added a lot of good information. The questions that we received from you and other people have been excellent. But Protospiel, I think Merle's suggestion of going to Protospiel is one of the best things you could do, honestly. And just prepare yourself. Make sure your prototype is ready, and just ask questions. This is the most important thing. Get as much information as you can from other people, their feedback. And there are a lot of companies, unlike some businesses where you won't get any help from people who view you as a competitor. Okay, this is like more of a community. That's the really nice thing about the game business, the comic book business, science fiction. There are a lot of creative people, and they share. It's like it's not a zero sum. It's not like I succeed only if you fail. Okay, it's like no.
Yeah, when you do original stuff,
community, we all benefit if we work together.
Yeah, original stuff people want. And
yes,
original people that have creative original stuff aren't worried about the competition because they're the original. Okay, and that's important to understand. It is. But Dana,
much more interested in growing the field, as compared to fighting for a percentage.
But I do want to clarify one thing. This Dana guy really is totally bogus, and he will grind you into dust because he wants no competition whatsoever.
Well, I would not be competition, but I do appreciate. I just don't have, I guess, a social network.
Yeah.
In my area.
Sure. And
so coming here and being able to talk to somebody, it's really eye-opening.
So another thing to look at some point is, the whole homeschooling environment, because there are a number of game manufacturers who've been experimenting with that because so many people are homeschooling now. that if it's got some of their educational value, even if it's just socializing kids from third grade or second grade.
Well, I've actually had the game beta tested with I'm a teacher, and
Why am I not surprised?
Huh?
Why am I not surprised?
And I took it to we call it, she's an ESOL, English as a second language teacher. And she played it with hers, and she wrote me up how well she thought this would work in an educational field
Sure.
as well.
Sure.
So going an education route is a good secondary. It is not the primary, but it is a good secondary.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we're past time now,
Sorry.
so we're going to call it.
Thank you very much for your time.
And I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
Take care, Dana.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Stay out of
Take care.
trouble mostly, man. We know you
All
can't
right.
keep out of trouble altogether.
All right.
All
Well,
right,
am I
just
going to say
close out.
goodbye now, or are we going to talk for a little bit?
No, I